All right, guys, part one of this build series, day one, I guess. We've got some things done. I've made a little progress. I'll just go ahead and show you. So we've got the engine and trans sitting in the car, bolted up. We've also got the steering rack in, and we started playing with some diff placement. So I'll just walk you through quick kind of how we got the motor and trans set in. Obviously, we bolted it together on the ground using the backing plate. That's how you align the transmission and engine. If you guys didn't know that, these don't have like clutch alignment tools. The backing plate is the alignment. So you just get them lined up, and you put in your two longer bolts, and then your two shorter bolts, and then your motor bolts, and you tighten them all up. And that backing plate, like I said, centers and aligns the trans with the engine. So we used the cherry picker there to kind of lower it down in there between the two bars. We had to go in from the side. We got it sitting on these mounts. We ended up having to modify them just a tiny bit as far as to make them flat and flush with each other, because they were a little angled. No big deal. So we set that in there, and then we ended up actually cutting off this back plate for the trans mount and hiking that up as high as we could possibly get it, so that the transmission, and I don't know if you'll be able to see, but underneath here, it is sitting above the bottom of the bar. That way we can run some kind of bash plate and not worry about hitting the transmission on rocks. It'll have some kind of plate under there along with a skid as well. But that was the plan there. Get that up as high as we could. As far as placement goes, it's, almost factory. I mean, you can look at the Turbo S. I mean, it peeks out the back of the radius plate there too. So that's sitting far back. I wasn't expecting, to have this much room between where potentially the firewall was going to go and the engine. So we'll have enough room for a battery. I'm debating on putting the fuel cell here as well. I'd like to do a big one, like I don't know, 10 gallon or so. That'd be super sweet. Or put it over the front there by the winch and the diff. Some people are just weirded out about having the fuel cell that close to the engine. I personally am not, but we have a ton of room there, so we'll have to figure out what we're going to put there, kind of eat up some of that real estate. Maybe even we move the firewall back and have behind seat storage inside the actual cabin itself. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it for the motor. We did end up putting the gear reduction in that transmission. I didn't film that. If you guys go back a couple of videos, there's like kind of a time lapse, not real explanation, like walkthrough video of how to do a gear reduction, but there is a time lapse of doing one. So I didn't film any of that. I got the gear reduction in. It's a 57 tooth or 57%, whatever it is, from Crash City. So it's got those parts in the transmission. It's a Pro XP setup. If you guys have missed any of it, this motor came out of a car. Motor and trans came out of a car that was in a fire. It started in the dash, worked its way back. The bed was on fire and fell down on the engine itself. So it was a lot of molten plastic, on the engine. The engine itself wasn't on fire. But so that's what we're going to be running in this, is a 2021 Pro XP engine and transmission. Supposedly has 1,100 miles on it. Yet to be determined. I haven't heard it run. I've turned it over with a ratchet by hand. It feels like it has good compression. So transmission shifts fine. Waiting on a few more parts to button this up, some coil packs and some sensors. But the engine pretty much is assembled minus the wiring harness. I do need a stator or starter power and ground harness deal. So then we move to the front. We got the steering rack mounted because we were trying to place the diff. Now, once you put the steering rack in there, you want to get this diff buttoned up as close to that steering rack mount as possible and still have the diff angled up, to avoid any kind of binding on that pinion or U-joints or anything like that. To do so, we were trying to put the arms in to make sure that they were lined up. The axles were going to be lined up with the diff, and it wasn't off-centered, you know, too far one way or another, and also high enough to where the cup, once that axle's in there, wouldn't hit the arm or the mount itself. So how I was going to do that is, you know, put the arm in and have some kind of plate here and put some axle cups in this to see, you know, the height. That way I can get this centered where I need it to and build some kind of tabs or mounting to place that diff. But the arms I got didn't come with any bushings, so waiting for bushings so that we can place those arms and start working on this diff mounting. From there, once that's done, then we can place a carrier bearing, which I think I'm going to run a stock carrier bearing. It's less binding on the drivetrain because it's rubber. It's got some play in it versus billet, you know, one piece or even two piece carrier bearing that you can get aftermarket. The stock one has some give. And also, if you guys don't know this, for a Turbo S, you can go to O'Reilly's in like a 99, 98-ish Tacoma carrier bearing is the same carrier bearing in these RZRs. So it's easy to get replacement parts if you're out on the trail or, you know, somewhere else, and you happen to blow a carrier bearing, a billet one. You can't find a billet replacement. You can get a stock one pretty easy. Most O'Reilly's carry Tacoma parts. So that's kind of the plan there. Waiting for those bushings to come. Like I said, just quick little update. I mean, we worked on this thing for a couple hours today. Did end up running into a few snags. Had to re-drill the steering rack mount holes. They weren't lining up. Had to fill in the holes that were there and re-drill 2 more. But kind of minor issues, minor little run-ins, and to be expected. I mean, every build is different, and you know, all these parts that you're going to use, you know, not everyone's going to use the same parts. Maybe a shock therapy rack or something. The holes might be a little off, or the factory mounting. I don't know. Either way. So that will probably be the next video, is once we get these arms, bushings in, placing the front control arms. That way we can figure out the diff placement and get a drive line ordered for this thing, a drive shaft. I'm thinking that I might do an RCV. Obviously, I said it'll have a carrier bearing. It's going to be a trail car, so I don't want to do a one piece. It's kind of a pain. I've heard. I've never experienced it with a one piece. To have it as a trail car, just, you know, it's hard to turn and there's a lot of binding, etc. So great for hill killing and bouncing, and you know, as far as longevity of, you know, not breaking a drive line, a one piece is definitely the route to go. Those guys come down under a ton of power and wheel speed with one pieces, and they stay together. So, but yeah, we'll get that mounted. We'll get drive line figured out, ordered, and then we can kind of start moving up from there, because that'll be the base. We'll get the trailing arms mounting knocked out. There's another set of tabs that are just like this that will sandwich the trailing arm, and then we can get the trailing arms on, get the hubs on, start figuring out shock placement. We'll have to add another bar in here somewhere, which I got some ideas for some bars. I think this thing's going to turn out pretty cool as far as visuals go. You know, I think it's going to have the right look. It's going to be mean. So, but that's day one update. Motor's in, steering rack's in, diff is in the process of being in. So just waiting for those bushings, and we'll update you as soon as we get those. We'll catch you in the next one.